Greetings to all the learners. Welcome to CEC lecture. The topic of analysis is Constructivism and International Relations Theory. In this lecture, we shall try to understand that how the end of the Cold War had important ramifications with respect to various perspectives in the domain of international relations theory. We shall try to understand reflectivism and how it posed a challenge to the prevailing rational theory. As we initiate the debate within this broad framework for the topic, that is Constructivism and International Relations Theory, we shall try to understand how norms and identities are important with respect to various issues concerning global governance, and also look at the very important aspect that how constructivism as an ontology, how it has a bearing with respect to understanding of international relations. This lecture shall explain the constructivist perspective in international relations. We shall elaborate on main assumptions of constructivism in international relations. We shall discuss how, as a social theory, constructivism highlights the importance of ideational factors which are historically and socially constructed, not simply material factors. This lecture shall examine main ideas of constructivist perspective in international relations and also look at the implications of the same for issues of global governance. To begin with, let us understand what do we mean by constructivism. Now, constructivism as a broad field of study looks at a specific aspect, that is, what is the role of human consciousness in social life. In the domain of international relations, with the end of the Cold War, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a big debate, that is, the main dominant international relations theory were unable to explain, to factor in these important events, the end of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union. The traditional perspectives in international relations theory could not account for it. And looking at this aspect, the end of Cold War, the collapse of Soviet Union, the inability of the main dominant international relations theory to explain the same, juxtaposed with the second aspect that there was too much focus on the state. The main realist perspective in international relations gave primacy to state as a rational actor. However, there are critiques that remarked that this ignored the agency of the individual. Further, that there is a need to look beyond the material reality. Earlier, international relations theory was dominated by realism and liberalism. The realist side, it focused on the conflictual aspects of international relations reality. In contrast to that, the liberal side focused on the cooperative aspects of international relations reality. The constructivist perspective gives a new dimension to this paradigm debate between realism and liberalism. It underlines that international relations, it is socially constructed. As we study international reality, we must focus on social relations to be factored in. There is a need to go beyond the stated reality. And at the same time, it points out that one must understand the effect of ideas and beliefs on world politics. Now, as we understand the constructivist perspective, dear learners, we shall differentiate between the traditional perspective and the constructivist perspective. The constructivist perspective tries to put forward the idea that reality is always under construction, which opens the prospect for change. The traditional perspective, namely the realist perspective, in this regard is status quoist. It only looks at conflict which is permanent, and in this arena of self-help, survival, prospects for change are less. The traditional perspective looks at the role of state, the various meanings within it as fixed. Constructivism, on the other hand, points out that how meanings are not fixed. Meanings can change over time, and this is dependent, this is contingent on the ideas and beliefs that actors hold. So what we see here is that while analyzing constructivism with respect to international relations theory, this perspective points out and gives to us certain important additions in IR theory, that is, agency and structure are mutually constituted. In the same vein, it points out that structures influence agency and that agency influences structures. Now, this is different from realism, because constructivism points out that if beliefs and ideas can change, then social relationship also can change. Alexander Whedon pointed out a very important idea, and we try to look at that now. The very popular perspective from Alexander Whedon, that is anarchy, is what states make of it. It has a very important meaning, that is anarchy, which was a very central concept within the neo-realist paradigm. In the work of Kenneth Waltz, anarchy refers to lack of centralizing authority. The domain of domestic is characterized by hierarchy, wherein we have a government, but the domain of international is characterized by anarchy, that is, absence of any law and order authority. So, Alexander Whedon's perspective, that is anarchy is what states make of it, points out that anarchy can be interpreted in different ways, and this is dependent on the meaning that actors assign to it. So what we get here is that within the constructivist perspective in international relations, there are two important concepts. And what are they? Identities, second, interests. States can have multiple identities, and these identities are socially constructed through interaction with other actors. Identities constitute interests and actions. Social norm, if we take the definition presented by a very important theorist, Peter Katzenstein, that is, social norms are defined as a standard of appropriate behavior for actors with a given identity. In the same perspective, in the same line of argument, the logic of appropriateness also needs to be considered. Now, the logic of appropriateness points out that actors behave in certain ways because they believe that this behavior is appropriate, and we take this perspective from the work of March and Olson. When we talk about norms within the constructivist perspective in international relation, there are three types of norms that we must understand: regulative norms, constitutive norms, and prescriptive norms. What are they? Let's understand them one by one, taking reference to the work by Fenimore and Secking. Regulative norms are concerning order and how they constrain behavior. Constitutive norms, they create new actors, interests, or categories of action. Prescriptive norms, they prescribe certain norms. Taking reference once again to the work from Fenimore, that is, through ideas, norms, rules, and understanding that countries shape their identities and that countries redefine their interests. Alexander Weden's very important work, that is, Anarchy, is what states make of it, the social construction of power politics, 1992. This work presents to the learner the limitation of the concept of anarchy to explain international relations. Realism talks about self-help. Somewhere one gets a sense of a deterministic argument here. Alexander Weden's work points out that self-help and outcomes are defined by process, not structure. Alexander Weden criticizes neorealism and neoliberalism that they cannot account for changes in the system. To take reference once again to the very popular article by Alexander Weden, that is, Anarchy is what states make of it, the social construction of power politics, published in International Organization 1992. That is, anarchy is not a mutable structure that determines states' behavior, but a condition whose meaning is itself contingent upon state relations. Constructivism is a term that has been coined by Nicholas Oneff in 1989. To take reference to the work by Nicholas Oneff, that is, The World of Our Making, University of South California Press, 1989, that is, people and societies construct or constitute each other. The fundamental structures of international politics are social. These structures shape actors, identities, and interest. The world is structured by both knowledge and material factors. Constructivism is different from neoliberalism and neorealism. Let us understand how. Because constructivism emphasizes and highlights the ontological reality of intersubjective knowledge. Both the material world and intersubjective knowledge, it points out to the domain of relative autonomy therein. Now, constructivism as an ontology, if we see, it is a group of assumptions then about the humans, the world, and agency. And within the domain of international relations, it recognizes the significance of the non-material power, culture, ideas, language, amongst others. It challenges rational theories, the hitherto existing mainstream theories, the rationalist theories that were often dubbed as status quoist. The constructivist perspective in international relations, then, dear learners, we must understand that it gives us alternatives which can explain the international reality through material and non-material factors. Within constructivism, we can look at two major strands. What are that? The North American literature, wherein one gets a sense of emphasis on role of social norms, identities in constructing international politics. For example, you must refer to the work of Alexander Whedon, Nicholas Oneff, Peter Katzenstein, Martha Fenimore. The second strand, that is the major strand of literature, is the European one. That is, one looks at the role of social discourses in constructing social reality, the post-positivists, the interpretivist scholars, and again important work here is that of Friedrich Kratochvil. Three different forms of constructivism one can get then, that is systemic when we look at the work of Alexander Whedon, unit level when we look at the work of Peter Katzenstein, or the holistic one, that is when we look at the work of Friedrich Kratochvil. So what we understand here is that constructivism in international relation as a perspective, it gives us certain advantages. Firstly, that it is a new perspective. It gives us a new way to look at international reality. It points out that how the fundamental elements of international politics are the social constructs. That is, when we try to understand power, national interest, they are not immutable facts. One has to look at them as a social construct. It also points out that international relations and the very important international reality cannot be analyzed on the basis of the distribution of power only. So one gets the very sense that constructivism in international relations, it rejects the pessimistic and conflictual side of international reality. It is a form of the reflectivist critique. Remember, international relations are a domain of debates. So when we try to situate the inter-paradigm debate within the fourth debate, that is the reflectivist versus rational debate, constructivism as a reflectivist critique gives a new way to understand international reality. The end of Cold War presented new challenges, questioned the hitherto existing theories, and asked for the fact that why they were not able to account for the changes in international reality. There was space for more diverse approaches. So, in order to understand the dynamics of global governance with influence of ideas, the constructivist perspective, the constructivist ontology gives us a new understanding of international relations. There are some of the important work, that is Martha Fenimore's National Interest in International Society, Christian Lewis Smith, Constructivism in Theories of International Relations from a third edition of Scott Burchell and others' book, the very important work of Alexander Whedon, the Anarchy is what states make of it, the social construction of power politics, the very important work of Nicholas Oneff, that is the world of our making. You must refer to all these texts in order to add more to your understanding, your answers, your research with respect to the very important topic, constructivism in international relations. We hope that the lecture on constructivism and international relations theory presented to you important insights. We look forward to positive, encouraging feedback from you all. Thank you very much.